You're listening to Permission To, the podcast where we dive into the science and soul of owning your worthiness as a perfectly imperfect human being. I'm your host, Sam Dew, psychotherapist, positive psychology coach, mama to a beautiful 5-year-old Amelie, and passionate advocate for living an inspired life. My aim is to show you that you have full permission to own your worthiness so that you can embrace your true nature and begin walking boldly toward your dreams. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Permission To with Sam Dew. I am so excited to introduce my next guest, Maree Eddings. So Maree is a lovely good friend of mine, and we have gone through several masterminds together, and I just adore her and adore everything she stands for. So a bit about Maree. Maree is an energy sensitive change leader and energy healer who is on a mission to expand the energy consciousness of the world through her training programs, Divine Leaders of Change Sistermind and the Energy Academy. She's the host of the podcast Divine Leaders of Change, and her aim is for us to ask and ponder the following 3 questions. What if you were never conditioned with a patriarchal mindset, structure or system? Who would you be instead? And now that we are here, how do we lead our way out of it? It is time for women to step into their role as a divine leader with curiosity and a knowing that this is the role they were born to play. So without further ado, let's dive in. So something we've been chatting about on Instagram, because I love a good DM chat, is what is going on in the world right now energetically. I'd love your perspective and your wisdom on this, Maree.
Thank you, Sam. And I love the conversation we had because you just said, what do you think's going on? And there is a lot going on. We have a lot of, if we were sitting in front of the television or listening to a radio news broadcast, you would sit there and think, is this like, am I watching a soap opera? Am I in a movie that just won't end? Because we are being hit from all different angles. And our nervous systems have been sitting in this space for well over 2 years. But in the last 2 years, it's been very much amplified. And so energetically, we've been pulled around quite a lot. And the challenge, because we are energetic in our makeup, that's who we are as human beings, is we will respond and react unless we create deep awareness and actively place attention to our energy where it needs to be. Otherwise, we'll feel like we're in a washing machine. Because what's happening is that we are witnessing the deep core of our patriarchal system and the behaviors that create that core. And our own systems get activated because we are conditioned to that system. We're going, well, hang on a second. I feel like I'm being, what I say, poked in our base chakra. I feel like I'm in fear around my resources and feeling secure and feeling safe. Because that's exactly what it's doing. It's making us descend our thought patterns and our thinking into, well, am I safe? We start to doubt ourselves. The whole purpose of the what and the reason why the system that we live in has lasted so long, it's exceptionally good at making us think that we're separate, that making us think that we need to divide to survive. And every time we get this rush of us getting more evolved in our thinking, along comes these, situations that ask us to either descend or we get to ascend. And I think we're in a moment right now where we're seeing a lot of people free fall into dissension and getting really caught up in the fear and the self-doubt and the self-trust.
Yes.
We must always remember that we have the other option. While we can see it, while we can go, oh my goodness, what is that about? We have a choice not to go there. We have a choice to put our energetic somewhere else. And we have a choice to put our life in our own hands, which means energetically we start to make decisions that are about trust and joy and connection.
So it's really like that permission to still experience joy and to still trust yourself and to still connect with yourself, even with what's going on in the world.
Yes.
And I'll share a little personal story here, because when Frankie was born, like the first month, we had this really special lying in period where I put a sign up on the door saying, we've just had a baby and we're not having any visitors. And I like just had this sense of like energetically wanting to protect Frankie and myself. And also like my beautiful husband, Nick, has a bit of a habit of like reading the statistics to me of like COVID and things like that out loud on the phone. I kind of was saying to him, energetically, I don't want to hear about COVID, or I don't want to hear what's going on in the world right now. I just want to stay in Frankie and Mai's energy. Anyway, in WA, we've been very lucky. We hadn't really had much problems with COVID, but of course, just after Frankie was born, COVID came to Perth, COVID came to WA. And then, we've had like a lot of really heartbreaking things happening in the world, like looking at what's going on in Ukraine. And then we've got the flooding in parts of Australia. And like it was really interesting. Like I set this boundary, like, I don't want to know what's going on in the world. And then it was like, oh, hang on, like a lot's happening. And I found it really hard to hold that boundary. And I also noticed, and I did a podcast episode on this, that when I was experiencing like a lot of joy and a lot of happiness and a lot of expansion in my life, I then felt this sense of foreboding joy, like, oh, who are you to be so happy? Who are you to be so safe when there's all this like really like sad and horrible stuff happening in the world? So I'd love you to like, do you have any advice or any wisdom around that, Maree, around like, what do you do when you're trying to focus on your energy and give yourself permission for joy, but you're also like feeling really impacted by what's going on in the world?
Yeah. And good on you for putting that boundary in place. That's fantastic.
Thank you. It was, I don't know how well I held it, like, but
doesn't matter.
The intention was there, and it, we kind of stuck with it for a good couple of weeks, and it was really
beautiful.
Yeah.
So we remember that when we're in, our life energetically is a trajectory. Mm-hmm. And so that trajectory is always available to us.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is, while we can witness someone else's pain, tragedy, circumstances, we have a choice. We don't have to live there. We're not responsible for other people's joy. We're also not responsible to carry their pain on our back.
Yeah.
And while that might sound a little bit harsh, because people go, but these people are suffering, understand it.
Yeah.
You suffering alongside them doesn't change the situation.
Yes. Yeah.
You wanting to be empathetic and feel like you are, being a responsible human actually doesn't change the situation.
Yeah.
Because where we put our attention, our energy will flow. And energy meaning all of our resources.
Yeah.
Physical, emotional, and spiritual resources are then put in that place.
Yeah.
Whereas that is not the best place for us to spend them. If we want to, pull ourselves out of this core of this patriarchal system we live in, we have to put our energetic resources somewhere else.
Yes.
And so if we're here to create a space of change and for us to step up, especially, and take up more space and know what expansion really is, we have to be prepared to commit and be responsible for where we put our energetic resources.
And that's so interesting, Maree, because for me as a mum and a business owner, I choose to put my energy into my children and into my business. And sometimes I feel some guilt around that, but then I also think, well, that increases my resources to be able to donate to causes to help the world, or, and to empower my family so that I've got more of a say in what happens in the world.
Absolutely.
But I think that's something, I know I'm not the only one who struggles with that. Like, I saw a lot of business owners like feel like they shouldn't be launching, because of the pandemic, or they shouldn't be launching because of the bushfire. There's been lots of reasons why we've told ourselves that we shouldn't, focus on our business. But
it's really interesting. So in the energy centers that lie within our bodies that hold all of our conditioning, our limiting beliefs, all of the vows we've made that stop us from stepping up. When we're in a space like this, we have a very specific part of our body that's activated. It's in our sacral energy space, which you'd be very familiar with giving birth. And the sacral energy is where we create life from. But it's also the vow that we take about how we want to feel about ourselves in the world. This is where we actually say, am I going to be a responsible leader and take up that space, that can create opportunities of joy and expansion and trust and transparency, and use my wisdom and actually create environments where people can shift out of where they are? Or am I going to let that go and just sit next to everybody and feel their pain and nothing changes?
Yeah.
So it's that self-responsibility that comes with this beautiful sacral energy that is very huge right now, especially I'm in the flood affected areas, and the element of sacral is water. So,
Yeah.
and water, the element of water is about changing environments. It literally changes spaces. You know, the ocean changes the shore, it changes the landscape. It erodes, it's eroding out the sides of our world here in Byron Bay. Like, the beaches have disappeared. It reorientates us. There is a real purpose why water is powerful and why we're being asked right now to rebirth a lot of things. And that means that we have to say, I have to look at what stops me from thinking that I'm capable of that. I have to look at what stops me from saying I'm not really willing to do that, or that I have the capacity to do that. Because if you're here in this time, we signed up for this time, is my belief.
Yeah.
And we have an option. All I know specifically when with energy, if you sit there and you look at the tragedy and you become the tragedy, you're no longer part of the change. You're no longer part of the ability to have the capability or the capacity to shift things. You are now part of the issue.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking, Maree, what it makes me think of a bit is as me as a psychotherapist, because I'm also a highly sensitive person. And so that can be like a real strength, but also a weakness. And what I've noticed, like holding space, you know, I've had sessions with clients where I've been holding them deeply in grief or trauma. And then I've learned to be able to end that session and to go back to experiencing my life and my joy.
Beautiful.
You know, and that might sound like, to some people that might be like, oh, but isn't that kind of like, that means you don't care? Or, but actually, like, it's the only way that I've been able to continue to do this work for so long. You know,
I think it means that you care more.
Yeah.
And you understand that everyone is responsible for their own space.
Yes.
And that's that energetic, physical, emotional, and spiritual space. We're all responsible for our own. I think about that scene in Dirty Dancing, you know, this is my dance space, that's your dance space.
Oh, yes.
No spaghetti arms. It's that sort of, we have to hold our space so other people can hold their space.
Oh, I love that.
The minute we give away our space, there's no space for anybody. It sort of just disappears and dissolves.
Yeah. So it's almost that, like, we need to have boundaries around our energy and our space, and it's okay to do that.
Well, that's the only way that we create that deep evolution. And I think the reason why we are seeing, because let's be honest, the things that are happening in the world today have always been happening. These are not new circumstances. These are not something that's never occurred.
Yeah.
They've always been there. And they're happening in a pace that our nervous system is really struggling with.
Yeah. Because
we have access to the internet and everything's, you know, live, real time. You know, a number of years ago, we were introduced to the world of fake news, which means that our trust levels have been undermined for a number of years.
Yes.
And so now when we look at things, we're not only looking at the immediate impact on our nervous system, we're filtering it through this space that says, I'm not quite sure I can trust what I'm seeing. And the impact of that is, I'm not quite sure I can trust myself.
Yeah.
And so what we end up doing is we stop making decisions.
Yes.
And we stop doing things, and we become this inertia of energy that's not doing anything. So our sensitivity starts to get more heightened, and we start to feel more. And so the cycle begins back into this idea of, I've got to make the right choice and be perfect and be all the things that we know, you know, leads us down that rabbit warren of feeling like we're not enough.
Yeah.
And so we don't do anything. So that's a big cycle that we keep going through.
Yeah. And you know what I was thinking, like, what's come up for me a lot with COVID, and this is just like, I'm just being really honest and sharing my thoughts here, that often I've looked at these situations and thought, if a woman was in charge, this would be really different.
If a conscious woman who had the consciousness and the intention to bring people together, and it was really about health, we would not have experienced anything that we've experienced.
Yeah, I think yes. Yeah, I just, even like when it comes to, like, my daughter's been asking me a lot of questions about the war, and it's really hard to explain these things to a 6-year-old because they don't even make sense to me as an adult. But, you know, yeah, I think a conscious leader, a conscious woman in charge, yeah, there would be a whole lot less war and a lot more discussion and negotiating. And I read it out in your bio, but I just want to read it again. Like, what if you were never conditioned with a patriarchal mindset, structure, or system? Who would you be instead? Like, I find that so powerful. Like, just to think about what's going on in the world and how would it be different if the patriarchy had never existed. It's quite a mind-blowing question.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the core of my work. We have to be able to not just call out the patriarchy, because we are the patriarchy. We're all the patriarchy. Yes. That's what our conditioning, when we go into spaces of feeling unworthy and not trusting, that's our patriarchal conditioning. Mm-hmm. That's the system that we are reflecting back to itself.
Yes.
So if we were never in that space, what would we be doing instead? And the question really is, well, if we stop being in that space now, how would we be living? What would we be creating? How would we be thinking? How would we be connecting and communicating? And then what would the world be like? I mean, I don't know about you and the people that listen to your podcast, but I'm over the patriarchy. Like, I'm done. I'm over women especially having to filter what they think is their self-worth through this consciousness and wading through the gunk and the grime of what the patriarchy has created us to believe is our truth. And it's not, it's just the system that we have been conditioned to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I did social work in my 20s, but it's only really since working as a coach and also, like, you know, becoming friends with amazing women like you, Maree, that I've really begun to, it's almost like everything I look at, I'm like, oh yeah, that's because of the patriarchy. Like, it's so ingrained. Like, you know, our whole childhoods are kind of modeled by this structure and these systems. And even the way we function as families. And I think motherhood for me has brought it up a lot. I've experienced like a lot of anger about the patriarchy.
That's
a lot of unfairness in the system and the way we expect mums to just like do everything on their own, really, sometimes without much support. It's interesting, like, questioning it all. And I'm definitely done with it, and I'm sure most of my listeners are too.
And I think sometimes we've been conditioned to think the patriarchy is somewhere else. It's a group of, white men in a back room somewhere who are, puppeteering the world. But in reality, we are all the patriarchy.
We're part of it. Yeah.
When we look at this, back to one of your first questions, when we look at what's happening right now in the world, we are witnessing the core of that patriarchal system. We have a choice. Do we participate or do we find another way to do it?
Yeah.
And that comes down to us becoming really aware of our consciousness. And consciousness is not about being good or bad or right or wrong. That's a patriarchal view of it. It's about understanding that all of our behaviors have a vibrational footprint. And so we can map our behavior by vibration, and we can say, well, that person might be standing on the podium saying all what we think is the right things. It's really wedded to keep us stuck in our patriarchal system. Well, if we think about it, there's a few leaders I could talk about that is like, well, they sounded really good until it became really crunch time, and they're really just supporting the old boy system.
Yes, yeah.
And they're women. And you sort of go, hang on a second. It's not about titles.
Yeah.
It's not about our experience. It's not about, where we've been educated or any of those things. It's really our willingness to say, how do I actually raise my consciousness and realize it's my behavior that will actually determine whether I'm there or not.
Yes. Okay. So so when it comes to knowing what energy consciousness is that around like watching your behavior rather than maybe what you say or think?
Yeah. So energy consciousness specifically is the vibrational measurement that we have based on our behavior. So I don't know, if you've ever been across someone or been in, conversation with somebody that is really good at justifying a decision they've made. And it sounds really good and it sounds like it's really well thought out.
Yes.
Anytime we justify something, we're in a patriarchal mindset.
That's interesting.
And so it does, like, we might think we're doing this amazing thing because our brain can be convinced of many things. The brain doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction.
Yeah.
And when we justify anything or we deny or we judge, they're all behaviors that vibrate and keep the hierarchy of the patriarchy in place.
This is so interesting. Like just yesterday, I made a bit of an admin error with a volunteer role that I'm in, and I only sent an email out to half the list instead of the full list. And I found myself apologizing and feeling like really embarrassed that I, had made this mistake. But it was interesting. It brought up this feeling that was very familiar to me, almost from childhood, I think, of like, oh no, you're not allowed to make mistakes and people are going to think less of you now and you're going to be criticized. And it was really interesting, like how, like, that's the thing, even if you're working on this stuff, right, it still comes up because it's been interwoven in our childhood experiences and our core beliefs, right?
Absolutely. And we have this amazing work that we've been doing in the world as individuals.
Yeah. Yes.
I think the time we're in now is, how do we take this beautiful work we've been doing on ourselves?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then apply it to the collective pot that we live in.
Yes. Yeah.
Because until we want to shape shift the environment that's created all of these conditions in the first place, individually, we're going to keep cycling through the self-doubt, the self-trust, all of those things we are going to keep cycling through because the environment's going to be the one dictating that. Where it's now time for us to shift the environment. And so energetically we go, we're not having to deal with the environment pushing in on us, because that's what it really does. Squeezes us back into our hierarchical thinking that, where am I in that space that I feel okay about myself? Either comparing ourselves to ourselves or to other people. Time for us to get rid of that environment. That's what we're really being called to do when we take responsibility for our behavior and understanding the consciousness that it creates.
How do we shift the environment? Like, that's a really good, idea. Like, so I think it feels for me easier to do the personal work and the inner work than it does to change the environment. That can be quite challenging, I think.
I think to remember that we are the environment.
Yeah. Okay. So we're part of it, and
I remember years ago doing some consulting work in an organization, and I was doing some change work with them, beautiful culture work. And I had all the different groups, different workshops, and we get to the same part of the workshop in every group, and they'd have all these amazing ideas about what could be done differently and how it's going to be done. And they'd all say the same thing. I'd go, well, come on, let's do it. And they go, oh, the business won't allow that.
Oh, okay.
And so when I went back into the senior leaders and I presented all the work and I was part of the group, and I said, so I've got a question. Who's the business? And they all looked at each other and they're all quiet for a while. Then they started to giggle and they went, we're the business. I go, yeah, you are the business. But for some reason, we use this idea that the invisible business is going to stop us. And we do the same thing. I call it the invisible P that sits above us, that we think we can't change anything because no one's told us we can change it or it's possible. But everything we put into the pot is where the pot sits. So individually, when we say, I want to have more trust, we're responsible for creating environments of trust. That changes the environment. When we want to live with more transparency and we create environments of transparency, that changes the environment. When we start to build our environment that is outside of what a patriarchal structure, system and conditioning has told us is possible, we shift the environment. So we don't need a memo to go out or a date that says, okay, on this day we're changing. It's everyday moments of, what am I going to reach for? Am I reaching for trust, transparency, connection, communication, intuition? Or am I going to reach for self-doubt, tragedy?
What comes up for me is it's about self-leadership then, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like really leading yourself through these sticky, uncomfortable experiences where you might, generally have a pattern of criticizing yourself or doubting yourself or not trusting yourself, and actually, trying to find a way into more self-trust and owning that worthiness. And
what if the option to hang on, have one hand on that patriarchal system wasn't there? What if it wasn't there at all? What if you had no way of reaching self-doubt? Or what would happen then? Like, what would the option be?
It's so, I remember learning this in my like my social work undergrad days, but like whatever we experience as a child, we think that's normal because we never see anything else.
Yep.
So we've all grown up with the patriarchy and it's a part of us and we're a part of it. And so we probably can't even really imagine what it is with, you know, like I see it as like a slow unraveling, and like each generation is going to hopefully experience less and less of it.
Well, I think your children won't ever experience it because they've come in with they've passed that. Like they would look and go, why would people go to war? Like that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, don't be so silly. Like they're on a different path already. They're not here to relive any of this, which is beautiful. But that also means that we have a responsibility, I believe, to make that path clear for them.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all here for a different purpose. And I think whoever signed up, you know, to be here right now, that's able, has the resources to want to be in a space of development, connection, you know, all of the things that helps and connects other people, then I think that's what we're really signed up for, is to participate. And I know we've had to come through our wounded spaces, and that's been really heavy. I do think we are moving past that quicker than people realize. And because we can see the way that our world is structured more clearly now, like 2020 was really about revealing how everything works. You know, healthcare is not about health, it's about profits and it's about funding. You know, we've been really, those things have been uncovered for us.
Yeah.
Once you see something, you can't unsee it.
No.
And, you know, we've also in 2021, I think we've been able to see the level of people's consciousness, which is really not a blame game. It's about how equipped are people to make decisions, how much capacity do they have to make decisions that are outside their natural space? How willing are they to say, that doesn't sound right to me, like that's not how that's supposed to be, and explore that further. How much capacity do people actually have for that? And so I think 2022 and beyond is us then going, well, what am I going to do with this? I've seen what's really there. I know that not everyone is ever going to be on the same page. So what's my role in leading us out of this? How do I dismantle that patriarchal conditioning within me? And instead of looking at the wound and going, I've got all these problems that happened when I was 7, which are all there, don't get me wrong, they live in our body. It's more about turning towards, how do I actually create more joy? How do I create more trust? We need to look into where we want to go rather than thinking that we have to clean up what's happened behind us.
Yeah, because when you lead yourself, you are then leading others.
Absolutely.
You know, like with Frankie's birth, and, you know, like the first 4 months of her life have just been so expansive for me. But that was because I decided that I wanted a different experience and I created it. But what's been interesting, I've had so many women and mums reach out and go, oh my gosh, like, thank you for sharing that, because they hadn't even thought that they could do motherhood this way or that they could do business this way. So I do think when we lead ourselves, we are then leading others, and like we're almost giving them that permission slip for them to then,
absolutely, we become the role models. And I don't like the word role models because it seems like there's a hierarchy or a podium. We don't have that anymore. But we need, as you said before, we need people to go first, so people go, that's what that looks like. That's what that means. They have it in their body already, but we need more people to say, I'm only going to be in this space. So every time I'm in an environment, the environment changes. And people go, oh, I'm going to take that bit. I'm going to take that bit because I know how to do that. And now I'm going to keep it rolling. So it is more about us stepping up in reminding ourselves that every space that we turn up in, we're a leader. Every space we turn up in, we have the opportunity to change that environment, not by lecturing, not by being the smartest person in the room, not by having all the stats and the big PowerPoint presentation, but by being it, by demonstrating trust and transparency and our wisdom and our intuition, by really embodying that space.
That is really, so empowering. I just feel myself like smiling from like the inside out, just hearing that. But it's also like, I don't know if anyone else listening will go, wow, like it's a big responsibility, right?
It feels really big in our energy, our physical body, because we think our conditioning tells us we still have to carry the old system on our back.
Okay.
And so I get that people go, that's just too much, that feels heavy. I understand it. But what if you took the old system from off your back? What if you didn't have any responsibility for anything in the old system.
Yes.
And you started from there and just allowed your body to breathe and for you to follow that trust of, I do want to experience more joy. I do want to experience more trust. I do want to have more transparency. I want to have conversations where I'm not doubting the other person's got this big agenda they're trying to hoodwink me for. I want to be in environments where people can be honest and can be vulnerable and can be have these ideas and shine themselves in my presence and not have to do anything but just to witness that. Like those environments, that's where I want to turn up. I don't want to be in environments where people are continually trying to beat the drum and hoodwink people and get power over. Like that's exhausting.
And I think what you were saying about like that we don't need to be hard on ourselves or try to be perfect. So all of a sudden that being a leader and self-leadership doesn't seem so scary if you give yourself permission to make mistakes and to get it wrong.
Absolutely.
It's something I have to work on and I support my clients with a lot as well. Like actually, you know, like when you're making change and you're doing the work, like sometimes it's not perfect and you don't have to get it perfect.
No, I think when we move out of that linear structure of hierarchy, that's where perfect sort of says I can move another ladder when I'm perfect.
Yeah.
But when we let that go, we realize that mistakes are fun. And it's pretty hilarious when you go, oh my God, look what I just did.
Yeah.
And then we just keep going because we're not actually trying to create perfection because there's no ladder for us to try and hang on to for that either. And so it's very freeing and releasing, and we can create different levels of change that we probably haven't thought about yet.
Very inspiring. And so I just want to finish up with, I'd love to know, how do we as energetic beings make the most of the moment we are in now?
I think for anyone who's listening going, well, how do I start? Because we're in an environment right now where we are, as we said, we are seeing the belly. It's a trajectory. So the other side is always available. You think about a coin, there's always the other side of the coin. And without the other side of the coin, nothing changes. Things will just keep in the same space. That includes our own personal life. The one thing that I know that when we want to flip the coin and start this space is to search for transparency. Transparency is like an antidote to things like judgment and comparison and denial and justification, which keeps us stuck. Where can you create more transparency in your life? And transparency is, I'm witnessing, observing, and I don't have to be caught up in it. I can see it and it's not my responsibility. I actually want to be more transparent with my feelings. I want to be to myself. I want to be more transparent about the obligations that I think I've got, which are not really mine. I want to be more transparent. And this is a big one, I think, for women, and one we really, really need. I want to be really transparent about my desires and my needs.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big one. I support women with that a lot. What was coming up for me then is like Brené Brown's work where she talks about like telling someone like the story I'm telling myself about this is this. That's really encouraging transparency, isn't it? Like if you imagine that someone's judging you or criticizing you in their head, then you could say, well, the story I'm telling myself is this, and like actually check in with them instead of carrying around that negative story about them in your head without checking it out. Is that what you mean by transparency?
That's a beautiful thing to do. I think we must remember that not everyone is going to meet us where we want them to be.
Yes, that's true.
And so when we practice transparency with ourselves, we get to feel, because energetically it feels really different than having to filter through the old filter of, is this right? And people are going to laugh at me. Oh, that's okay. Bolstering ourselves up.
Yeah.
When we practice transparency with ourselves, we'll start to feel the difference in our energetic self. And we go, oh, I actually don't need to talk about any of that because I now know that I'm focused over here and not back where I thought I was.
Yes, that makes sense. It's and it just takes, do you think it's something that you just, the more you practice it, the easier it gets?
Yes. And the thing to remember is when we start to move into these spaces, we're accessing energy that's already more expanded. There's already more available to us.
Okay.
On the old system, energetically, there's little bits of information and energy available to us. So our body feels hard and contracted. It's like we're really having to push through it. It feels really challenging. we don't access the same level of vibration when we are seeking joy, seeking trust, seeking transparency. It's like, and it's hard for us to imagine if we've never really gone there, but we need to think about it as there are no barriers. And so we get to like swim around in a space of going, I don't have to carry any mental chatter or any gut, churning, because I'm in a different, energetically, that doesn't live here. Like it doesn't live in this postcode. That's on the other side of the coin. This side of the coin is, so if anyone's done any work and you've done any clarity work and you come to the other side and you go, oh, I feel so much clear and everything feels amazing.
Yeah.
Think of that as your start point.
Yes. Okay.
And then we move from there. So that then becomes the baseline. So
it's listening to your body, and when it's a yes, and when it's, when you've got that energy kind of moving through you.
Oh, there's always more. There's always more.
Yeah. This is so interesting. And it just kind of taps into more and more curiosity for me. So I think I'm going to definitely have to have you back on the podcast another time.
That'd be great.
Thank you so much for being here. I was just curious if anyone would like to work with you in the future or know more about your work, where's the best place for them to find you? And have you got anything coming up at the moment?
So two of my values, Sam, are ease and fun. So the easiest way for people to connect with me is on Instagram.
Okay.
All my links and everything are on Instagram. So it's just at Maree Eddings. And there are 3 E's in that, Maree and then an E for Eddings. And I actually do my program, the Energy Academy, is about to come through. So where I teach coaches how to step into the space of working with people's energy bodies and understanding the energy centers and systems and what vows and beliefs that we have locked away, which, when we want to have big dreams and big businesses and relationships, a lot of the times we cycle through old patterns and we don't understand why we sabotage ourselves, why we can't ever quite get where we want to be. The majority of the reason is we've taken vows that sit within our energy body. And so I teach coaches how we unlock that and we release that for their clients, and how we get to know our own self from that energetic level. So the Energy Academy is coming up in my calendar. So if anyone is curious about that, I would love to speak to you about where you're at and how that is of interest to you.
Well, definitely drop Maree a DM, because she is a beautiful friend of mine and she's just lovely to chat to as well. And this podcast just did really come from me asking you a question, didn't it, on social media? And we're like, right, we need to just record this now. So thank you so much, Maree. It's amazing what women can do when they, decide to take action and follow their energy. Thank you. We will have you back on again soon.
Thanks, Sam. Such a delight to talk to you.